Welcome to Money Ketchup. The dawn of civilization smelled of damp earth and baking barley bread. In a sun-baked village nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, a young woman named Aya stared at the two sheep bleating nervously in her family's pen. Her father, a potter of some renown, lay feverish, and the healer demanded payment, 6 bushels of grain or a bolt of linen. Aya had neither. She had pots, beautiful, kiln-fired vessels with ochre spirals, and she had these sheep. This was the world of barter, the first chapter of our story. Money, as we know it, did not exist. Value was a chaotic dance of coincidental wants. Aya took her best pot to the grain merchant. "I need barley for the healer," she said. The merchant admired the pot but shrugged. "My stores are full. I need a new roof reed, not clay." Desperation clawed at her. She then drove the sheep to the linen weaver, whose son was to be married. "Will you trade for linen?" The weaver's wife sighed. "A feast we need, not more sheep to tend." Aya's problem was the double coincidence of wants. For trade to occur, she not only had to find someone who wanted her sheep or pots, but that someone also had to have what she needed, at the exact moment she needed it. Value was subjective, fragmented, and frustratingly immobile. The village elder, seeing her distress, offered a solution. "Take this," he said, handing her a small, smooth river stone, pierced with a hole. "Old Curry the healer knows this mark. It is a promise from me for a day of my son's labor at her harvest. Give it to her for your father's care. You will owe me a debt." This crude stone token, marked by the elder's authority, was a leap. It was not valuable in itself, but it represented a future value, labor. It was a unit of account and a medium of exchange, detaching the act of payment from the immediate physical exchange of goods. The healer accepted the stone, trusting the elder's promise. Aya's father was treated. A week later, the elder called upon Aya to help his wife with pottery for the harvest festival. The debt was settled. This was the genesis of credit, the invisible skeleton of all money to come. Centuries flowed like the great rivers. Aya's village became part of the sprawling metropolis of Babylon. The stone tokens evolved into clay tablets, pressed with intricate cuneiform script. In the bustling temple precinct, scribes like Enkidu recorded debts with solemn efficiency. Belshunu owes the temple of Marduk 30 gur of barley, to be repaid at harvest. The tablet was dried and stored. It was money as memory, an IOU etched in clay. But clay was bulky, and a king's promise was only as good as his reign. Then, in the cool, stone-lined treasury of King Croesus of Lydia around 600 BCE, a new sound echoed, the sharp clink of metal on stone. Here, the story of money gained weight and luster. Lydian craftsmen had perfected a technique of creating small, bean-shaped lumps of a natural alloy of gold and silver called electrum. They stamped them with a lion's head, the king's seal. These were the first true coins. The innovation was profound. The value was now embedded, or so it seemed, in the object itself. The precious metal had intrinsic worth. The stamp guaranteed its weight and purity. A coin was durable, divisible, you could cut it, though it was frowned upon, portable, and uniform. A merchant from Corinth could now travel to Sardis, Lydia's capital, and his bag of lions held value recognized by all, independent of any single person's promise. Money became impersonal. It anonymized exchange, lubricating trade across cultures and kingdoms. Yet from the start, temptation lurked. Croesus' successors, and countless rulers after them, would secretly debase the currency, shaving the edges, mixing in base metals, trying to cheat the scale, to create more value from thin air and thicker alloy. Our story now sails east, to the bustling, innovative Song Dynasty China of the 11th century. Paper was a Chinese invention, and so, it seems, was paper money. In the trading city of Chengdu, merchants grew weary of carrying strings of heavy bronze cash coins for large transactions. They began depositing their coins with trustworthy warehousemen, receiving in return a beautifully printed paper receipt. This receipt, a jiaozi, could be traded for goods. Why haul a ton of copper when a slip of paper would do? The imperial government, seeing the efficiency, took control. They established state monopolies and issued the world's first government-backed paper currency. It declared, in elegant calligraphy, that this note was worth a certain weight in silk or silver. It was a return to promise, a grand imperial promise, but now on a scale unimaginable to Aya's village elder. A Venetian merchant named Marco Polo would later write of this with astonishment, describing how the great Khan's mint turned mulberry bark into treasure that funded an empire. But the lesson of paper was its fragility. Without discipline, the promise was too easy to break. The Yuan dynasty that followed the Song printed notes recklessly to finance wars, triggering hyperinflation and eroding trust to dust. Paper money, they learned, was a powerful ghost. It needed the solid anchor of belief to haunt the world of trade. The anchor, for centuries to come, would be gold. Our narrative shifts to the vaults of the Bank of Amsterdam in the 17th century. The Dutch were masters of global trade, and their whistle bank, Exchange Bank, solved a new problem: the chaotic variety of coins from hundreds of mints circulating in the port. Merchants deposited their silver ducats, Spanish reals, and gold guilders. The bank verified their weight and purity, then credited the merchant's account in a standardized ledger. The merchant could then write a check to pay a supplier. The actual metal rarely moved. It sat in the vault, a silent, golden bedrock, while its paper shadows did the dancing. This was fractional reserve banking in its infancy. The bank realized not all depositors would demand their gold at once, so it could lend out more paper promises than it had gold, effectively creating new money. The genie of credit was out of the bottle. The drama intensified in the coffee houses of London, a century later. A Scottish financier, John Law, a man with a gambler's eyes and a philosopher's tongue, captivated the debt-ridden French court with a radical idea. His Mississippi Company, backed by the promise of vast wealth from the Louisiana Territory, issued shares. Frenzied speculation drove prices to absurd heights. This was one of the first stock market bubbles. More crucially, Law's private bank issued paper notes against the company's future profits, not gold. For a glorious, terrifying moment, money became pure story, a shared hallucination of future wealth. When the story collapsed, the paper became worthless. Law's system showed the terrifying and thrilling power of money decoupled from tangible backing. It was faith, speculation, and narrative, naked and unchecked. The 19th century demanded order. In the financial heart of London, the gold standard emerged as the great disciplinarian. Britain, and eventually much of the world, pegged its paper currency to a fixed weight of gold. A British pound sterling was, by law, redeemable for a quarter ounce of gold at the Bank of England. This created stability for international trade. Currencies had a fixed relationship to one another via gold. But it also straitjacketed economies. The money supply was limited by the fortuitous discovery of gold mines. During wars or crises, countries would suspend convertibility, revealing the standard to be a convenient fiction maintained in peacetime. The ultimate break came in the summer of 1971 at Camp David. Our story finds its modern pivot point here. U.S. President Richard Nixon, facing inflation and a run on America's gold reserves, made a historic announcement: the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The temporary measure became permanent. The world moved to a system of fiat money. Fiat, Latin for "let it be done." Money's value was now decreed by government order. It was backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the issuing nation, the collective belief in its stability, its legal system, its military power, and its economic future. The dollar, now a pure green promise, became the world's reserve currency. The anchor was no longer at the bottom of the sea, gold, but in the shared psyche of humanity. It was the ultimate abstraction. Central banks, like modern alchemists, could now create money with key presses, trying to manage economies through interest rates and quantitative easing. The power was immense, and the potential for abuse, through inflation or loss of that vital faith, was its constant shadow. Which brings us to today, to an anonymous server farm humming somewhere cold, and to a young coder named Leo in a San Francisco apartment lit only by the glow of 3 monitors. Leo, like millennia before, was frustrated with the system. He saw central banks printing money after the 2008 crisis, bailing out the powerful. He saw exorbitant fees for sending money across borders. He saw trust in institutions eroding. In 2009, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper for Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Leo was an early adherent. Bitcoin proposed a new, radical chapter: decentralized digital money. Its value was not decreed by a state, nor backed by a physical commodity. It was born from code and cryptography. Its ledger, the blockchain, was maintained not by a central bank but by a distributed network of computers, miners. It was transparent, immutable, and had a hard-coded scarcity. Only 21 million would ever exist. It was trustless money. You didn't need to trust the government or a bank. You trusted the mathematics, the consensus protocol. Leo bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin in 2010, a transaction now legendary. He watched, with a mix of awe and horror, as this digital artifact, this string of code, soared in value, birthing a universe of cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and decentralized finance. It was John Law's speculative frenzy combined with Croesus's stamp of authenticity, the cryptographic seal, all playing out at the speed of light. Money had become entirely dematerialized, a cloud of data points whose value swung on tweets, rumors, and the fragile consensus of a volatile crowd. It promised liberation from traditional power structures but created new ones: crypto whales, mining conglomerates, and replicated old pathologies of speculation and fraud on a digital frontier. One evening, Leo visited a museum exhibit on ancient civilizations. In a glass case, he saw a Babylonian clay tablet, a Lydian electrum coin, a Song Dynasty Jiaozi, and a Spanish piece of 8. He saw the progression, from tangible good, sheep, to physical token of a promise, stone, to valuable metal, coin, to paper promise, banknote, to digital entry, bank ledger, to decentralized cryptographic unit, Bitcoin. He realized the history of money was not a linear march toward better technology. It was a spiral, continually cycling between two poles, substance and promise. The sheep were all substance. The stone was all promise. The coin tried to merge them, substance with a stamped promise. The banknote was a promise backed by a substance, gold. Fiat money was a pure promise enforced by law. Cryptocurrency was a pure promise enforced by code and network consensus. The essence of money, he understood, was neither metal nor paper nor code. It was a social agreement, a story we all choose to believe in. It is a tool for allocating resources, storing labor across time, and facilitating exchange. But it is also a mirror, reflecting our deepest societal values, our trust, or lack thereof, in authority, our relationship with scarcity and abundance, our hopes for the future. The clay tablet recorded a debt to the temple, reinforcing social hierarchy. The coin empowered the itinerant merchant. The banknote funded empires and revolutions. The digital ledger could enable financial inclusion for the unbanked, or create new layers of exclusion for those without digital access. As Leo left the museum, he pulled out his phone. With a tap, he sent money to his sister overseas, the transaction zipping across fiber optic cables, settled in seconds for a tiny fee. It was a miracle Enkidu, or even a 1970s banker would find incomprehensible. Yet, the fundamental question remained the same as when the village elder handed Aya that stone: do you trust this promise? The weight of money had long since vanished from our pockets. But the weight of that question, the collective faith required to sustain the entire, intricate edifice of human exchange, had never been heavier. The story of money, Leo knew, was far from over. It was constantly being rewritten, in every transaction, in every policy decision, in every line of code, as humanity continued its eternal negotiation between value and trust, between the thing itself and the story we tell about it.